Right now, in the last 10 minutes of conversation you've had today, you were probably lied to. Not a big lie, not a dramatic one. Someone said, "I'm fine," when they weren't. Someone said, "I love your haircut," and didn't mean it. You probably lied too, and you didn't even notice yourself doing it. So here's a strange question. What would happen if, for one single day, nobody on earth lied at all? The real answer is much stranger than you'd expect. Your first instinct is probably hopeful. A world without lies sounds like a better world. Cleaner, more honest, safer somehow. But researchers who have spent decades studying deception have found something unsettling hiding underneath that hope. Lying isn't the exception to human social life. It is one of the load-bearing walls holding it up. Start with the numbers, because they're more extreme than most people expect. Psychologist Robert Feldman ran a study at the University of Massachusetts where he had strangers meet, talk for just 10 minutes, and then reviewed the recordings together. The participants were shocked to discover that most of them had lied at least once or twice during that short window, often without even realizing it. 10 minutes, 2 strangers, multiple lies. Now stretch that across an entire day, across every person on the planet, across every conversation, every text message, every social interaction. What does that add up to? Psychologist Bella DePaulo, who has spent much of her career mapping the architecture of everyday deception, found that most lies aren't the dramatic kind you see in movies. They're small, quiet, barely noticed. She calls many of them white lies, small social lubricants that smooth over moments that would otherwise create friction. I love the gift. Traffic was terrible. No, you didn't wake me up. These aren't malicious. They're structural. They hold the walls of daily interaction together. So imagine the switch flips. Midnight arrives, and lying simply becomes impossible. Not illegal, impossible. What happens in the first hour? You wake up. Your partner asks how you slept. You say terribly because you actually did, and you also mention that the sound of their breathing kept you up half the night. That's not a lie. That's a fact you would normally soften or skip entirely. Now it just sits there in the room with you. You get to work. Someone asks what you think of their presentation. Normally you'd say something kind and vague. Now you say exactly what you think in full, unfiltered detail. Multiply that by every employee in every office on the planet, all at once. Does that sound efficient? Or does it sound like every workplace on Earth entering meltdown by lunchtime? Here's where it gets genuinely strange. Communication researcher Timothy Levine developed something called truth default theory, based on decades of research into how humans process what other people tell them. His finding is almost uncomfortable to sit with. Humans are wired to assume other people are telling the truth, not because we're naive, because assuming honesty is what makes rapid, functional communication possible at all. If you had to rigorously verify every sentence anyone said to you, conversation itself would grind to a halt. This default trust is precisely why small lies work so well, and precisely why a day without them would create so much friction. You are not built to receive a constant stream of raw, unfiltered truth. Your social brain is built to receive a curated, softened version of it, and to offer the same curation in return. Remove the curation, and you don't get purity. You get static. Think about what a marriage runs on. Not perfect honesty. A negotiated, evolving blend of honesty and protection. You didn't do anything wrong when something small did go wrong, but isn't worth a fight. I'm not upset when you are, but you've decided the moment isn't the right one. Remove that layer entirely for 24 straight hours, and you're not looking at a healthier relationship. You're looking at an accelerant. Now zoom out to something bigger than any single relationship: diplomacy. International relations run on carefully worded ambiguity. Negotiators rarely say exactly what they think. They say what keeps the conversation open. Remove that layer for one day, and every diplomat on the planet is suddenly required to say precisely what they believe about every other nation, every leader, every ongoing conflict, out loud, in real time. Does that sound like it leads to peace? Or does it sound like every fragile truce on Earth collapsing by nightfall? Even something as simple as a surprise party becomes impossible. The entire structure depends on selective information and occasionally outright deception about what everyone secretly knows. Remove that, and it isn't a surprise anymore. It's just a group of people standing in a decorated room, waiting. Multiply that principle outward. Negotiation, sales, courtship, interviewing for a job. Every one of these depends on some amount of controlled mutual performance. What you're describing, when you remove all lying, isn't a pure version of these systems. It's the collapse of the systems themselves. Here's a question worth sitting with. If total honesty would break so many of the systems you rely on daily, does that mean deception is actually good for you? Not exactly. The picture is more layered than that. DiPaolo's research draws a clear line between pro-social lies, the small kindnesses that smooth interaction, and self-serving lies, the ones told purely to protect or benefit the liar at someone else's expense. A day without lying wouldn't just strip away the comforting lies, it would strip away the harmful ones too, all at once, with no warning and no room to prepare. Picture that. Every affair confessed by morning, every embezzlement scheme surfacing by noon, every fabricated resume, every faked alibi, every hidden addiction, every quiet betrayal, all becoming visible in the same 24-hour window, everywhere on earth, simultaneously. Some of that would be justice arriving all at once. Some of it would be devastation arriving all at once, with no time to process any of it individually. This is the strange duality sitting at the center of the question. Lying is both a form of social glue and a form of social camouflage. It smooths the small frictions of daily life, and it hides the large fractures that people aren't ready to face. Remove it entirely, even briefly, and you don't get a cleaner version of society. You get every hidden structural crack in every relationship, every institution, and every negotiation exposed at the exact same moment. There's a reason evolutionary psychologists believe deception is deeply woven into social cognition rather than being some cultural add-on. Complex deception requires modeling what another mind believes, then constructing a version of reality that manages that belief. That's a sophisticated cognitive skill, and it shows up remarkably early in human development. Children as young as 2 or 3 begin experimenting with deception, long before they've been taught any explicit theory of honesty or dishonesty. It isn't learned bad behavior bolted on top of an honest default. It develops alongside language and social awareness themselves as one of the core tools of navigating other minds. So if lying is that deeply built into how humans function together, what would 24 hours without it actually reveal? Not that humans are dishonest by nature, in the simple damning sense of that phrase. It would reveal that human social life runs on managed information, not raw information, and that the difference between those two things is the entire fabric everyone is standing on without realizing it. By the time the 24 hours ended in this thought experiment, most relationships wouldn't look pure. They'd look ruptured or at minimum badly bruised and slowly repairing. Most institutions wouldn't look more efficient. They'd look like they'd been hit by a controlled earthquake, with the true fault lines finally visible on the surface instead of buried underground where everyone had quietly agreed to leave them. Maybe that's the real reframe here. The question was never really about whether a lie-free day would be good or bad. It was about noticing something you walk past every single day without seeing it. The vast, invisible scaffolding of small deceptions holding up nearly every relationship, every workplace, every negotiation you're part of. You don't see scaffolding when a building is standing. You only see it when someone starts pulling the beams away, one at a time, and the whole structure starts to shift. So the next time someone tells you they're fine when they're clearly not, or compliment something they don't quite mean, don't think of it as a small betrayal of truth. Think of it as a tiny, quiet act of construction, one more beam holding up a structure you rely on every day and rarely think to look at. You weren't lied to in the last 10 minutes of your day. You were held up by it.